Deacon John Shea has some thoughts to say about today's gospel. The story ends with the main character who is doomed and has no relief from the consequences of his choices. The ultimate reason is he was not listening to Moses and the prophets. The teachings of Moses and the prophets clearly tell us that the rich are supposed to take care of the poor. So instead, the rich man took his wealth as a personal advantage and numbed himself to the plight of the poor. This isolated him from others and kept him at odds with God's purposes. In other words, nothing survives and flourishes that does not cooperate with God's plan for creation. If we hear this story as a straightforward prediction of punishment for the unfeeling rich, it's a wonderful example of trying to scare us into changing our ways. We may dress and eat well for the short span of human life, but we'll be thirsty when it comes to eternity. So the choice could be passing pleasure or everlasting pain. Yeah, I don't like those choices. But heaven is thought of as a fixed place, somewhere up there or out there. And it helps us focus on something that's outside of time. It makes heaven and hell kind of murky and ambiguous. The story of the rich man and Lazarus begins on this side of death and continues on the other side of death. What happens on the other side reveals the truth of what happens on this side of death. There's one thing that clarifies what we need to do in this pre-death segment of our lives. The way the world works is not how God works. The social arrangements of time are not valued in eternity. The theology that sees earthly riches as a sign of God's blessing and earthly poverty and sickness as a sign of God's displeasure is mistaken. When this kind of thinking is used as a rationale for maintaining this distance between the rich and the poor, or the black and the brown and the white, then this thinking is particularly insidious. The real energy of God is to rearrange for the goods of the earth so that all people of the earth can share in all of the provisions of God. God's reign does not support the status quo of inequality and division and fear. We have to step out of the idea that rich equals blessing and poor equals curse as the first step towards thinking about this new life in God. Abraham from across the chasm gives the rich man a refresher course in prophetic theology. So this is what Abraham is basically saying. What is it you don't understand about this? Let me tell you the basics. You lived a life of luxury, deafened yourselves to Moses and the prophets, and numbed yourself to the needs of the poor. So now you're on the other side where your consequences have reached fulfillment. You find yourself isolated and tormented. Why is this a surprise? Our entire Jewish nation, Abraham says, began as the poor and exploited. Everything in our history has urged us to welcome the poor and the exploited, and you have not done this. Do you really think you can ignore and resist God's purposes and succeed? Did you miss that teaching in Sunday school, in the synagogue? Now you want a spectacular sign for your brothers. Are you saying there wasn't enough evidence for you? If you had just a little more certainty, your self-interest would have kicked in and you would have anteed up? Is that what you're trying to say? That's not the problem, Abraham says. If your brothers like yourself did not heed the whole history of our people, they will not listen to a man who comes back from the dead. The problem is not that they didn't know, but that they didn't care. They hardened their heart and drank their wine. Nothing gets to them, and this self-imposed isolation is your destiny and your brother's destiny. There are no excuses, says Abraham. And there's one more thing to consider in our lives. The directive to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor is clear. There are enough material resources to bring this about, like the food giveaway, like the food that Epiphany cooks and serves at Good Shepherd. Thank you. But how society and individuals should go about bringing the rich man and Lazarus together is not clear. The path must be discovered by each and every one of us. We've heard these powerful words. We know how to put them into action. What are we going to do? Maybe it starts with eyes that see. The Christian message always searches for creative disciples who can translate the spiritual truths into social facts. On one side of the door, the rich man feasts. On the other side of the door, Lazarus starves. Who holds the key to open the door? Who is hungry that we walk past every day? Who is it that we refuse to see? Amen.